Hi, I'm Chef Ralph Filipelli, and actually we're here at Luna's today discussing something that I really had to do some research on, which was foods from 200 years ago. I guess 1821 you said? I was thinking 1820 when I did my research. I'm sure that'll be close enough.
Yeah, I think so.
Yes. And it's for a Christmas dinner celebration, I believe, and I even made something. This is a mincemeat pie. Prior to me making this mincemeat pie, I only knew mincemeat from a cartoon when I was a kid. He was going to make mincemeat out of a mouse. No mouse in a pie. And that's it. So, okay.
Excellent. So, Ralph, obviously we were talking about, you said 1820s. So,
Yeah.
what types of foods were people eating then?
It looked like anything they could grow or catch. Is from ducks to pork, pigs, pork, venison, a lot of venison, beef, because they raised the beef. And then oysters kept turning up. We just had that discussion on or off camera a minute ago. And what impressed me most was that they needed or used everything. And I was talking about when I write menus from, when I first noticed this was the 100th anniversary of Titanic. I wrote a lot of Titanic menus. And people didn't want authentic food, they wanted modern-ish food with authentic names from the period. And if you look, and especially in 1820, this is well before the invention of refrigeration. So things were dried, preserved in different ways, sometimes overly spiced. You'll be like tons of cinnamon. Even saffron turned up in one of the recipes. And then there was this other thing from your thing, the I mispronounced it, fermentary.
Yes.
Which I was like, fermentary. So you Google fermentary, and you're like, what is, it's apparently has to do with fermentation, and which is kind of obvious once you've done it. And you just basically, it's like storing everything you had and preserving it by fermenting it. And also, another thing I stumbled on in this research was one of the early restaurants of the time in the 1820s advertised coffee, that they had coffee, and that it was the first time that people were told, don't drink early in the day. We have coffee for that instead. Don't drink meaning alcohol. So because people would always drink beer and alcohol. Now those beers and wines didn't have the alcohol level we do now, but that's what they would drink because a lot of times they would not trust the water. So if you look into revolutionary times, I was joking about Ben Franklin was probably drunk half the time if you read his what he did and what he wrote, and it didn't mean he wasn't smart. And one of my favorite characters from the founding fathers' times, but they would drink their wine and their beers and whiskeys and whatnot in considerable amounts. And then, once again, having to do with food safety and storage.
Excellent. So, you mentioned a little bit about how, there was no refrigeration. So, you kind of said everything went in together. So, is that kind of the era where we're talking about everything but the kitchen sink was in your dish?
Pretty much, yeah. Well, this is the mincemeat pie, which I'm so proud of, because first of all, it looks good, and secondly, I learned what mincemeat is. And where I kind of figured, it seems obvious, chopped meat. Modern mincemeat pie, no meat. If you just were making it, like, I don't know, went to a bakery and somebody had a mincemeat pie, it's all dried fruits. This one has beef, minced, chopped really small. Not hamburger, I used a knife to chop it, I didn't grind it. And dried fruits, which I had all these things on hand because I use a lot of it. Dates, cherries, raisins, of course, dates, raisins, figs, and I think that might have been about it. And then I used some jam. I had some mango jam I put in, which is dried because I didn't have any dried mangoes, which they may or may not have used back then. And there is, speaking of alcohol, rum is one of the ingredients in this, about a cup of rum. So a lot of things had to do with their foods were dried and preserved that way, or cooked fresh if they shot it or raised it. They did have herds of sheep and cattle and whatnot, but they once again used everything. A lot of menu items turning up over and over again The feet and the lips and the brains, the sweetbread, they call them sweetbreads, which is the organs, which is, they're neither sweet nor bread. You know? So that was actually on one of my menus when I was in culinary school, and it was the Carême room, and Carême is a chef from this time period.
Gotcha.
A Napoleonic chef, and he's considered one of the founding people of writing menus and codifying food preparation techniques. Another thing I noticed from these menus, which is cool, is presentations were elaborate. It was very focused on how food would look, and they did some things that were a little different for me, like boiling a whole turkey sometimes, or boiling things they did, but also roasting quite a bit and smoking. And especially in this part of the world, smoking was a way of preserving. And a lot of the good techniques, good things we like to eat, came from pre-refrigeration times, because you had to think of a way to make it last longer and taste better. And smoking foods was one of those ways.
Okay.
And of course, beef jerky probably came out of that, leaving stuff in the smoker a little too long, and that's forever. We'll just take it on the wagon train ride, or Pony Express guys probably carried it or something. Not really chef food like I'm used to with things in my background and training. The grains, corn, meals, products, duck. There was a bunch of duck.
Okay.
And even to this day, one of my good friends, and I play poker with him, once brought 20 or 30 ducks to one of our poker games. We threw them all on the smoker, and I never had such heartburn in my life. I probably ate a duck and a half that night. That, because he was a hunter, or he's a hunter, and venison. There's a lot of menus, and they're basically the same menu items that turn up on hunters' menus: quail, venison, duck, and then the raised foods, which were lamb, turned up more than it does now.
Absolutely. So some of the research I had saw as well, it seemed like a lot of these feasts, for one, they weren't one-day feasts; they were 12-day feasts, long festivals, and they seemed like a lot of them kind of became drunken debauchery revelries.
Yes.
Is that something you found as well?
A little bit, yes, and that kind of goes back to people needing to let off steam, because they work so much harder, physically harder than we do. We all work hard now, but and it may have had roots going all the way back to the medieval kings and whatnot, just thinking about it, but you had to, and you didn't have other ways to celebrate. If you didn't live in a big city, even if you did live in a big city, you didn't have the kind of distractions that we do now. Like, you couldn't look at your phone, you couldn't, you had to, when you were blowing off steam, you had to pack it all in, and that's what it seemed like. They would go on for days, they would party, they would drink, and they were just packing all of their entertainment into a week or two or whatever period they had, it seemed like, because the rest of their lives, people didn't even much to do, and I did run into that when they blew up, when the cork came out of the bottle, it really
And that makes sense. And I think you and I had also talked a little bit about the 12th cake, Christmas cake concept. Could you explain that a little bit so we kind of get an idea what that was?
Yeah, I did. Well, I would say that was traditionally having a cake with a prize built into it, I think, and getting it right. And this is something I don't know much about prior to this. And they would make cake, I believe it was 12 cakes, and one of the people would get similar to I believe the king cake in New Orleans.
Okay.
And they would just have the prize in it, but I'm not sure what the prize was. Do you know?
From what I read, if you got, I think it was a bean, you were the king or the queen of the event.
Oh, okay.
And if you got a pea, you were the other. If you were a woman, obviously you would be the king of the event. And basically, I think that just meant you were the guest of honor. Like, from what I read, it was basically just you were made special, and you won that night.
Cool. And
So
you got toasted, and everybody
exactly
drank the ale to you. You know, it's like
Everybody, even the servants, would be able to partake in the cake. And even if it was a servant, if they got the bean or the pea or whatever, that person got to be the star of the day, the evening.
So, Ralph, do you have anything else you can think of that era that would be a fascinating fact that people would like to know? Kind of about Christmas. You know, we're picturing Joseph having Christmas dinner with his family all the way back in that era. Anything else you can think of that would be kind of fascinating facts?
no, well, my background from that era, it doesn't really pertain. It has to do with what I know naturally, or just naturally, what I've been trained in, is knowing like European food history, Napoleonic times, how, you know, Carême and Escoffier, you know, the food got started. But what I took from that was locally sourced ingredients, even from, like, I don't know, this would have been then one of the larger settlement cities that was founded as a city in
1843.
43. I was going to say 49, but that was the miners in another city. I lived in San Francisco. And you didn't have as many choices. You had to eat locally, and there was a lot, or maybe a lot more. There was much more focus on ceremony and celebration than on actual food. Like now you'll read menus, oh, we got this special mushrooms, we got this, we got that. Back in the day, you had the things you had at every celebration, and the key was the cake where the people got to be honored, the fact that it went on for days sometimes, and it was just a different lifestyle and very interesting that I'd like to learn more about as well.